Good evening, everyone, and welcome to Masterclass number 8 under the Masterclass series. We've been conducting this series across the past few months in order to bring about certain management concepts to the audience. We've had MBA aspirants participate in our sessions. We've had young professionals as well. So we hope that today's session also adds up to your entire learning process. For today's session, we have emotional intelligence in the workplace. A very interesting concept, specifically, I think now with the work from home fad, if I may say so, that's been part of everyone's life. We're going to analyze or we're going to understand this subject much more deeper with our speakers today. And to take us through this session, I have with me Professor Shilpa Shinde. Ma'am is an assistant professor for human resources and organizational behavior. She's had more than 6 years of experience across industry and academia. And she'd be taking the major part of the session today. We also are joined by Professor Diganta Chakrabarti. Sir is the Associate Professor for Human Resources at Flame. He's had an industry and academia experience of more than 14 years, including developing curriculums, developing MDPs for various corporates, and likewise. Without a lot of much delay, I'm going to welcome Shilpa ma'am to start the session. And guys, please note that you have a Q&A button on your screens. You can put in your questions on the Q&A, and I will try to get those questions to the panelists at the end of the session. Thank you so much. And Shilpa ma'am, all yours.
All right. Thank you so much, Anju, and very good evening to everyone here. I can now see actually some chats from one of our students here, and I think there might be some more whom we know. So welcome not only to our alumni, but also prospective students and others, who are exploring their relationship with Flame University. So today's topic, like Anju said, emotional intelligence in the workplace is really relevant, especially in COVID times. It has been a very popular topic for many, many years. Okay, so almost 50, 60 years of research has gone behind it in academics, and in the industry also, it has been a very, very talked about topic. So it's nothing new, really. Emotional intelligence, many of you may be aware of what competencies are included in the model, etc. However, I'll assume that some of us don't know the details, and we will talk more about the details also. But coming back to COVID times, so we all know that it has impacted us, and although we may be coming to terms with those impact, especially of negative environment, and we might be seeing certain positives to working from home, or we might be seeing positives to developing the skill set to deal with very uncertain times, yet the negative impact has been much more. So it is a very relevant topic in COVID times because of the whole impact it has had on our emotional life, our mental health, and especially on negatively on the emotional side. Okay, so before we discuss further, I'll just share my first slide with you. Okay, I think you should be able to see the slides. Anju, are you able to see the slides?
Yes, ma'am, we can see you.
Okay, okay. Okay, so Peter Salovey and John Mayer, these were the pioneers in defining emotional intelligence. They are American psychologists, very renowned professors, mainly became renowned because of their work on emotional intelligence. Okay, and they defined emotional intelligence as a form of social intelligence that involves the ability to monitor one's own and others' feelings and emotions, to be able to discriminate among them, and to use this information to guide one's thinking and action. So emotional intelligence is about not only being aware of your own emotions and being able to manage them, but also about developing this competency to influence other people's emotions, which is, needless to say, a very, very important skill for not only new employees but for leaders as well. So since organizations and managers are always concerned about whether they are inspiration leaders or not, whether they are being able to really motivate their employees or not, engage their employees or not. And employees are also always concerned about how should I navigate my career, my job in a way that I'm able to overcome the difficulties or my own weaknesses and remain or become successful. So in that sense, emotional intelligence is not only about your own emotions and managing them, but also about influencing others, influencing your relationships at work and in your personal life. In the 1990s, Daniel Goleman was the person, again, a psychologist and a very, very popular science author. He was the one who actually made the concept really popular, especially amongst the industry. So although Salovey and Mayer were the ones who did a lot of research on that and came up with the whole model, it was Daniel Goleman who simplified the model and was able to bring it to the corporate world in a much more simplified way. And before we look at the model and each of the components and how these different competencies reflect in our day-to-day life and how we can actually develop them, so before we do all of that, let's just take a look at a short video by Goleman himself where he explains why EI is so important. Okay, Anju, would you be able to share the video? I'll stop sharing my screen.
Yes, ma'am. Yes. Let me know in case if you're able to see the screen.
Yes. Yes.
Since I started writing about and researching emotional intelligence in business, I found that the data in support of it has only gotten stronger. I saw recently a study, this surprised me, engineers, software coders and so on, were evaluated by their peers, people who work with them day in to day, on how successful they were at what they do. This turns out to be one of the strongest predictors of success in any field. And that was correlated with their IQ on one hand and their emotional intelligence on the other. And when I say emotional intelligence, they were evaluated on a 360 that looks at all 12 of the key emotional intelligence competencies and that distinguish star performers from average. The surprise was this: IQ correlated zero with their success as rated by peers. Emotional intelligence correlated very, very highly. Well, why would that be? Well, consider this. In order to be an engineer, you have to have an IQ about a standard deviation or more above average. That's an IQ of about 115 or so. And another recent paper shows that there's no relationship between career success and an IQ above 120. The reason is this: there is a strong floor effect for IQ in any role. All engineers have an IQ of 115 or more. So the range of variance is very reduced for IQ and success. Emotional intelligence, however, varies radically. So emotional intelligence means how well you manage yourself. Can you work toward your goals despite obstacles? Do you give up too soon? Do you have a negative outlook or a positive outlook? These are all emotional intelligence competencies that matter for success. Then there's the relationship competencies. Can you tune into other people? Do you notice other people? I remember hearing about two MIT grads who went into a giant tech company. One of them went around to other members of her team and asked, "What are you doing? How can I help?" The other stayed in his office and wrote code all day. And it's very clear who was going to get ahead. It was the one who wanted to be a team player. You don't write code in isolation anymore. Everyone works on projects together. You may write the code, but you have to coordinate, you have to influence, you have to persuade, you have to be a good team member. All of those are emotional intelligence competencies that distinguish outstanding from average performers. So when you think about it that way, it makes sense that even among engineers, emotional intelligence will predict who is a star and who's just mediocre. And when you think about this at the organizational level, it means you want to be sure to include emotional intelligence when you consider hiring people. I have a friend at an executive recruiting company specializes in C-level hires, CEOs, CFOs, and so on. And they once did a study internally of people they had recommended who turned out to be bad and were so bad they were fired. So these were failures. They were surprised to have failures, but they realized when they looked more carefully that these were people who were hired because of business expertise and IQ and fired because of a deficiency in emotional intelligence. So it's more important than ever these days. And so in hiring, it needs to be considered. In promoting people, of course it needs to be considered. And it should be part of HR. It should be what you help people develop further strengths in. Because the good news about emotional intelligence is it's learned and learnable. And you can upgrade it at any point in life if you're motivated.
Right. So what Goldman talks about is something very controversial, actually, that, IQ and technical competence may not matter that much in your success. Obviously, it does not mean that, IQ is not important, or your technical knowledge or expertise that you have developed over so many years is not critical to your success. It definitely does not reflect that. What he means here, and what scientists have been finding in a lot of different researchers on different groups of employees, is that after you control for your IQ and your technical competence, meaning after you have people who are already employed with you, so obviously you have recruited them because they have some basic level of IQ, and they qualify for those jobs because they have gathered the qualifications through their studies or through their work experience. So after you have that group of people who are similar on IQ and technical competence, then when you check for their success over the years, and many longitudinal studies have been conducted over like 30, 40 years, and you check for people's success, their effectiveness, also their emotional health, their levels of happiness, what has been found is that EI is the differentiator. So people with high emotional intelligence are the ones who are able to navigate the different things that a job or a career throws at you, and are able to come out of it successfully because they are able to manage their emotions and their relationships much better. So looking at the different components of EI, so obviously there has been so much research on this, and several competencies have been added over the years to the model, but we'll stick to the more traditional or the classical model of EI that Goldman presented in the 1990s. So the first component of this model is self-awareness. Just a humorous take on self-awareness, I'll let you take a look at this. So obviously this is a funny take on self-awareness, the self-deprecating part of self-awareness, which is very much true. When people are self-aware, they're aware of their weaknesses, they are aware of their shortcomings, they know how they respond in certain situations, or what is their impact in certain situations. So it's not just, of course, it is the humorous part, but it is also very realistic in that sense. But self-awareness is much more than that. It is not only being aware of your weaknesses, but also of your strengths, of your values, what you really value in life, what would you like to stick to when you have to make choices, your goals in life. It is also a skill of perceiving and understanding one's own emotions. So people who are self-aware, they know what triggers particular emotions in them. So they will know that, if there is a meeting with a certain client, or if there is a meeting with a boss, how are they going to exactly feel in that situation? They are very, very in tune with their emotional responses to a variety of situations in their life. Of course, both work life as well as personal life. they understand that, some emotions in them arise because of their history, meaning their past experiences. So if you have been bullied in school, or you have been a student who did fairly well in certain subjects but not so much in others, you would realize that it is those experiences that are impacting your emotional reactions in certain situations now. So if you're asked to talk about a topic that has always been a difficult topic for you, you might start feeling very nervous. You might start feeling very anxious, although you have developed experience in that area of work in your work life. But because in the past, in your academic life, maybe because it was not a strong area, you still have that emotional reaction whenever that topic comes up. Or you have been stereotyped for your gender, you have been stereotyped for your background, for the place you come from, or for the languages that you speak or do not speak, or for the accent that you may have. So you may have had experiences, especially negative experiences related to those, and they may trigger certain emotional reactions in your immediate situation, where actually that reaction may not be justified, because then you might not be stereotyped anymore, or you might not be experiencing bullying anymore. However, when you start meeting certain people who remind you of your past experiences, you might trigger those emotions in you. Also, emotions may be very confusing sometimes, because different emotions can occur together. For example, at work, if your boss is a very difficult person, you may feel anxiety when you talk to that person. But at the same time, you may also feel fearful that you're always being judged by him or her, and you are going to be appraised by your boss. So you feel a mix of emotions. You feel anxious, but you also feel afraid. You also probably feel eager to prove your worth, to prove your abilities. So it could be a mix of emotions. Also, working with team members, your group, your work group, you may not like working with some people, and you may just not gel with some people, and that it just triggers this emotion of irritability, or even in extreme forms it may just trigger disgust for certain people. But that these are the people you're working with, and they also affect your performance. So you may also be a bit fearful that you will be either removed from the group, or you may be losing out on certain benefits by just expressing your emotions. So a lot of different emotions may occur at the same time, and therefore they can be very confusing. So part of being self-aware depends on your ability to monitor your emotional state, and to be able to correctly identify and label your emotions. Okay, so you have to educate yourself in how to label your emotions, and how to discern what exactly are you feeling. Now here, a lot of times we are defensive about how we are feeling. We may say, no, I'm not feeling fearful, I'm just worried about something else. So you try to mask certain emotions, because they may not make you feel good about yourself. So it is important that to develop self-awareness, we are able to not only know, what different emotions feel like, so educate ourselves on that, but also build, more courage, and try to reduce our defenses towards those emotions, so that we can identify them. This is important because it leads us to our next step, which is about self-management. Unless and until you are able to identify your emotions correctly, you are aware of those emotions correctly, you are not going to be able to manage them well. So self-awareness is the first step, and the next step is your self-management. Again, I think most of us are, we can relate very easily to this cartoon. So true self-control is waiting until the movie starts to eat your popcorn. And it may differ in case of different people, what you're eating, but it's very true, that there's so many different situations in our life where we don't feel in control of ourselves. Not only we don't feel in control of the environment around us, that's a separate thing, but we may not feel in control of our own emotions. So self-management is a competency which talks about how do you manage your emotions so that you can motivate yourself to work better, you can manage your life better. It is defined as a skill of managing one's own emotions effectively, which means cultivating pleasant emotions such as calmness, appreciation, and enthusiasm, diminishing the longevity or the intensity of unpleasant emotions. So, it's not just about trying to control negative emotions, it is also about trying to cultivate more pleasant emotions. So much research has gone behind studying how emotions can be influenced by our thoughts. So if we work on our thoughts about the things that we are worried about, the things that are affecting us negatively, if you are able to think more clearly about it, if you are able to change our thoughts about it, it has an impact on our emotions as well. So that's how the brain works. So the more you work on the thoughts, it has an impact on the physiological experience of your emotions as well. So self-management is about developing that ability to, work on your thoughts, to work also, more relaxation techniques, and, those techniques also help there. But mainly it is about changing how you think. It is about changing your perspective on things. It is about trying to see the other side of the situation, about not becoming very rigid just because you perceive something in a certain way. That's the only way to look at it. So, having this sort of a perspective helps in managing emotions, reducing the occasions on which unpleasant emotions occur. So once you are in tune with how you feel in different situations, you can actually proactively take steps to reduce those situations in your work life. So if you know, so very broadly speaking, if you know that a certain job is not making you feel good, not because there's something wrong with the company or the product that you're working on or your team or your boss, but just you do not like the nature of your job. If broadly that also becomes a part of your awareness, that this is what actually triggers all kinds of negative emotions in me, the nature of my work, you can definitely try to see, is this what it is about? Should I actually change my job? Should I change my line of work? Or is it about something else? Is the all the guilt or the anxiety or the worry that is happening in my work, is it because of lack of competencies? So I need to actually train myself, develop myself, study maybe, or take somebody's mentorship to develop myself. So be able to identify situations, occasions which trigger unpleasant emotions actually helps you in managing those emotions. Suspending judgment and thinking before acting is very, very critical to self-management. Like I said, being able to see the other side of situation, being able to take a different perspective on things, all of that makes self-management possible. But before that, you have to have this ability to say, okay, let me not react immediately, let me not respond to the situation just now, let my emotions settle, let me come in touch with what it really is, let me give it some time, and then act on it. So it may seem very simple, it may come across as an extremely no-brainer kind of thing, but we all know, if we think very carefully, we all know that there are so many situations when we are not able to do that, especially in case of intense emotions. You feel extremely angry, almost like a rage. Somebody brings up something about things that you're touchy about. It could be anything. It could be about your family, it could be about where you studied, or it could be about whether you have the right skill set to do a certain job or not, and somebody criticizes you for that, or somebody just merely mentions it, and it might throw you in a fit of rage, and you may not be able to suspend your judgment. You may react immediately, and that will have a huge impact on your relationships at work, because at the end of the day, we know that professional relationships are much more delicate than personal relationships. Personal relationships, you still have the space to repair them. But in professional relationships, the scope of repairing is very, very little, especially if you are a young employee, who's just entered the workforce. You are not going to get those many chances to prove your credibility. So suspending judgment, especially in case of intense emotions, is a skill that one needs to develop, one needs to work on. Moving on, the third competency in this model is about being socially aware, empathy. Now, this is also a word that has become even more relevant in COVID times, and there are so many articles on this, not only for employees to develop empathy, but also leaders. Leaders should be developing more empathy. So again, a humorous take on what empathy might look like. So this picture reflects actually what is part of the ethical training of medical professionals, where they're taught bedside manners and they are taught to empathize with their patients, the family members of the patients. And this is a joke where this doctor is just pretending to be empathetic to the patient. Anand Mahindra, very, very famous for his, opinions on social media. A very interesting quote by him, which talks about empathy. If you aren't humble, whatever empathy you claim is false and probably results from arrogance or the desire to control. But true empathy is rooted in humility and the understanding that there are many people with as much to contribute in life as you. So empathy actually can be mistaken for, just showing concern or showing compassion or showing sympathy, but it is not so. It is not about being superficially interested, being, just showing care superficially. That would be actually very manipulative. Okay. It is also not about just being very nice to people, very warm to people all the time. It is not about that as well. It is about really trying to put yourselves in other people's position and trying to understand what they must be going through so that you can respond to them in appropriate ways. So it is the skill of perceiving and understanding others' emotions, being able to observe the non-verbal signals. So this is a very important part of empathy, where you are able to, notice not only what the person is saying, but also, the person, his or her voice, the expression on the face, eye movement, whether they're making eye contact or not, the way they're leaning their head, their posture, how they're speaking, the speech, okay, the breathing, it's heavy breathing, it's relaxed. What is it? So many times, we are so preoccupied with what we are thinking and how should I deal with this situation, or how should I, explain my situation to this person who's probably complaining or requesting or just talking to me. We are so preoccupied that we fail to notice the non-verbal signals given by people. Sometimes we may be able to notice, but we may not be able to understand them. So being empathetic requires one to not only devote yourselves in a way for that period of time when you're talking to someone, to really observing and understanding the person, but also it is about educating oneself in what different nonverbal signals could mean. So as managers, as new employees, as leaders, everyone needs to invest some time to really understand that non-verbal communication is a very, very important part of communication. We pay so much attention to the verbal communication that we actually fail to recognize that we miss a lot of points just because we were not paying attention to the non-verbal side of things. So it is a very critical skill for managers, because they are responsible for their employees, they're responsible for motivating their employees. And if they come across as people who just don't get other people's feelings or emotions or thoughts, they will be considered to be not very adequate. It is very important for employees as well, because you work so much in teams. You can't just be very rational about working in a team. You can't think that just because a person has been given certain responsibility, he or she will not have any difficulty and should not let anything affect the goals set by the team. People go through different situations. It's very difficult, although it's said that one should keep their personal life out of their professional life. It's usually not the case. People are not able to leave things behind. People may be impacted not only by personal situations but also their preoccupation with how they're performing at work. So even when you work as a team member, it's very important for you to develop this skill. Empathy is about treating people according to their emotional reactions. Okay, so if somebody is extremely worried about something and you respond by saying, oh, it's okay, just don't worry about it, it'll be fine. And then you start talking about whatever was there on your mind or whatever you were discussing in terms of work, the person is going to feel very, very left out and also very misunderstood. And obviously, this will affect your relationship, your bond with this person. So empathy requires you to not really belittle or ridicule or just be indifferent, dismiss people's emotions. That's just not about being empathetic. Empathetic is about listening to people not only for what they are saying but also for what they are feeling. So an important way of demonstrating your empathy is firstly to really mustering the genuine concern in you. Okay, and it may seem very pretentious in the beginning to you yourself that I have to, if I'm not naturally feeling concern for people, how do I demonstrate that, how do I express that? Well, you have chosen to be in a certain situation, to be in a certain work life, to work with certain people. If you do not feel concerned about them, it is something that you should think, why am I not feeling concerned? What does it say about my values as a person? And if I'm not feeling concerned, I should be ready to bear the consequences for that. And if you go more and more deeper into that, most human beings can generate some amount of compassion and concern for others. So, starting with that, the next step would be to really listen well. We all focus so much on how we talk, how we express ourselves. So, listening is a skill that is not developed in most cultures. It is not a skill that is taught at school or college or in any of the culture. What is taught to us is how to speak in more polished ways, how to express ourselves in more articulate ways, but listening, not really. So it's really important that we try to become better listeners. If you just go back to your own life and you think about moments when you felt really good interacting with someone, you will realize it was not so much about how that person was talking, how articulate that person was, but mostly about how well you felt understood, how well you felt being listened to. So, being a good listener, being able to respond to people's messages, not only verbal but non-verbal, also is an important step in developing empathy. Lastly, okay, so this is the last part of my presentation, is relationship management. So all the three competencies, self-awareness, self-management, and social awareness in terms of empathy, all of them feed into this particular competency of relationship management. If you have self-awareness, self-management, and empathy, as you have been able to develop those competencies, it will help you in managing your relationships in a way that they become very, very fruitful for both people involved. So here you can see the boss is surprised and the employee is looking very dejected, almost regretful for what he has done. He's spoken about his boss outside. So most people tend to be tend to make this mistake or have faced this situation some of the other time where they have chosen to not directly address the issue with the person, but really address the issue outside, where actually that would not change the situation. So this we do because we don't have the skill set to manage relationships. We don't know how to really solve a conflict. And so to just give us feeling some vent, we may speak about those conflicts at places where they might actually backfire. So relationship management as a competency, it is about proficiency in managing relationships, in building networks. It's an ability to find common ground and build rapport. So to be able to work with others in a collaborative manner, to be able to build rapport with people, relationship management is where all of these come together. It is the skill of expressing yourself, influencing others, and managing conflict. So we have seen empathy, which is about trying to understand the other person. And now in relationship management, empathy, when it is combined with assertiveness, which is about expressing yourself, when these two come together, it leads to much healthier relationships. So when we are talking about empathy, we are talking about understanding the other person and taking their perspective. When we talk about being assertive, we are talking about making the other person understand what you are thinking, what you are feeling. So being able to communicate your wants and needs in clear and confident ways, in ways that are neither aggressive nor passive, is what assertiveness is about. A lot of times assertiveness is misunderstood for being very, very bossy, very rude, very arrogant, hostile. So assertiveness is not about that. It's not about being pushy or aggressive. Neither is it about being passive or submissive or just being a doormat and taking whatever the world has to offer, all the negative things. It is not about being that as well. It is about knowing your rights, being aware of what value you add to the situation. So considering yourself a worthwhile person, as well as about understanding that other people have their rights too. So assertiveness is about respecting your rights as well as respecting others' rights, taking that attitude. Once you have that attitude, you will be able to develop the skill of expressing yourself more clearly. Being assertive plays a very important role in relationships because you'll face various situations. Sometimes at work, your boss may demand so much work out of you. If you are really competent, the other the downside of it is that you will be done with a lot of work. And being able to say that I will not be able to take this up can be an important assertiveness skill. Now, being able to say no, it does not come from just being overconfident or cocky. It is basically about understanding your situation, whether you can actually do the work given to you or not, and being able to express to the other person without getting all upset and irritated that why does my boss not get it that I can't do this. Instead of having that sort of an emotional reaction, being able to control your emotion, your irritation, your annoyance, and be able to explain in more factual ways to your boss that uh, I would be happy to do this, but there are three other things that you've asked me to do, and I'm right now at this stage in doing them. So really, I may not be able to take this right now. But if this is really urgent, then I will fall behind on other tasks that you have given me. So being assertive requires you to believe in yourself. It also requires you to obviously have a very strong work ethic, which gives you the confidence to say no, because you have been doing so many other things for your role, and also about being able to express yourselves without anxiety. Also, a lot of times at work, you may face these social pressures about maybe socializing after work or during work. And although it might be good for the relationship, but when we talk about protecting your rights, you might feel that, I need some time off. I cannot socialize, even though it's important for the bond with my team members. And in those situations, being able to express yourself assertively would mean not getting upset or angry, or not just going with them because you just can't say no, but being able to communicate that you would like to do it but you just cannot do it because of this reason. So assertiveness is that path which is actually very difficult to take. Culturally, we are not taught to say no. It's very, very difficult for us to say no. We expect the other person to understand and not ask unreasonable things from us. We get very upset. We resent people who make requests that we cannot fulfill and cannot even say no to. But instead of experiencing those emotions, or you may experience them, but you can learn to manage them by being assertive, by being able to say very clearly that, I cannot do this because of this reason. Okay, so this is the end of my presentation. We just had 1 hour, so we have kept some time for Q&A. But before that, Anju, I would like to request you to show the last video. It's just 2.5 minutes. Let me stop sharing my slide.
Yeah.
Emotional intelligence refers to the ability to recognize, interpret, and process emotions in yourself and others. While genetics, upbringing, and environment all play a role, there are steps you can take to develop your emotional intelligence over time. Get to know yourself. Emotionally intelligent people are self-aware. They have a realistic appreciation of their strengths and weaknesses and how they come across to others. Peer feedback is one way of improving your self-awareness and may uncover a few of your emotional blind spots. Learn your triggers. Linked to the notion of self-awareness is knowing how you are likely to respond in particular situations. Think about how you felt the last time you were under pressure. Did these feelings help or hinder you? Recognizing emotions and the source of these emotions can shift your emotional state. Empathize. Seeing things from someone else's perspective will help you understand their values and beliefs. This is important when it comes to motivating and engaging others. Make a conscious effort to get to know your colleagues. Ask open questions and actively listen to what they have to say, rather than simply waiting for your turn to speak. Be on the lookout for body language and other non-verbal signs, as these may tell you more than someone is willing to express out loud. Own your emotions. Part of being emotionally intelligent is about taking responsibility for the way you interact with others. If someone upsets you, pause and reflect on why their actions led you to feel this way, instead of reacting impulsively. Recognize that a conversation is a two-way interaction, and it takes two people to make you angry, sad, or frustrated. Go with your gut. Finally, listen to your body. If your stomach starts doing backflips every time you speak to a senior manager, or your muscles tense up before you go into a meeting, what does this tell you? Counterintuitive as it might seem, emotions can be a valuable source of information when making rational decisions at work. Remember, emotional intelligence isn't about suppressing emotions. It's about learning how to recognize, process, and channel them in a way that benefits you and your team. Enhancing your emotional intelligence requires effort, but it can be achieved with sustained practice.
Thank you so much, ma'am. That was a wonderful presentation, and I'm sure everyone else in the audience, we've already received a couple of questions that have been going on. Before I start off, I'd also like to invite Professor Diganto to join us in this conversation with the Q&A. He's already been answering quite a few questions as well. So one question that has been sort of came across during this presentation was also that we spoke about expression. We spoke about how you can tell someone that this is not something that you're up to, or this is not something that you don't want to stretch out this far. This is not in your ability. But do you think that it's a culture thing as well? Because at least within the students that we interact with, within our community, our culture, when we see that someone comes up and says that no, I can't do this, or they are perceived to be someone who are extremely soft, or they're perceived to be someone who can't take. You always go and tell a child that saying, listen, you can't express yourself, you can't cry over this, or you can't really mull over this, because this you need to be strong. So does this culture thing also come into picture somewhere when you're talking about emotional intelligence? Either of you, if you could take it. Sir, you're on mute.
Yeah,
Yes.
I think I will try to answer that. Definitely, culture or our conditioning, as we call it, from childhood, has definitely a very big role to play in terms of how we later on interact. Right? I mean, people don't really change much after a certain age, as we know. But that is where, from the organization's point of view, as we are talking about how we use the principles of EI or EQ in the workplace, that is where the training interventions come in. That first people have to be made aware that they are what they are because of a number of reasons. Part of it is conditioning, part of it is the background that they had, the kind of education that they have gone through, their past experience, all of that. And then if we have, when you're talking about culture, if I talk about another culture, that if we also can build something like a very conducive organizational culture where emotional intelligence is really valued, then we are talking about reaching somewhere with employee productivity. Because otherwise we will be leaving that at that point that people just came in like this, and there are so many of them, we cannot manage everybody individually, which is true to some extent. But that is where the role of the other culture, which we always stress in human resource management, as students of human resource management, uh, is organization culture. That how much value do you really give to emotional intelligence, things like empathy, things like self-regulation in our daily interactions or communications, whether it is peer to peer, whether it is boss to peer, boss to subordinate, subordinate to boss, in all channels. And that is what I'm talking about is, we cannot simply say that yes, we value this and not make it part of our organizational communication process. I think that is something which is, if made part of your daily employee engagement or employee experience activities, right? Then slowly it will take time, but after a point, that this is an organization which understands me for what I am and does not discriminate. So things like inclusion, things like diversity management, things like participation, it all grows along with a systematic implementations of the principles of uh, EI, as ma'am was talking about. Right.
Okay.
I'll just
Yes, ma'am.
I'll just add something here. So what Sir was talking about, largely organizational culture and how we can, use that as a mechanism for people to, express themselves better and, improve their performance, because we are saying that emotional intelligence is important. The part that you asked about, is it our culture? And I talked about in self-awareness, so, some things you have historically experienced, and that's why you've developed in a certain way, because you're told not to cry or not to express anger. And this is also very gender specific, right? Certain gender, like if you're a boy, you are expected to behave in certain ways emotionally, and girls are expected to behave in certain ways. I think for all kinds of emotional issues or psychological issues, what is a good test for us to decide, whether I need to express this, whether I need to change this, whether I need to manage this, is how much is it affecting me, and do I like the consequences of that? So whether I'm told that you should not cry too much, If the consequence of that is that I feel much better and I'm actually able to connect much better and I'm able to build a emotional bond with others because I'm, vulnerable and I show my vulnerability and I can connect to others in that way, then why not? Of course, it doesn't mean that you will just keep crying bucketfuls on any situation. What I'm trying to say is that a good way for a person to judge whether they should manage a certain emotion better or not, whether it is because of the culture, whether it is because of other experiences, we forget about the causes, but whether we should do something about it or not is about the consequences that we experience because of those emotions and because of those emotional expressions. So that is where the self-awareness part also comes, not only being aware of how you feel, but how it is affecting your life, and then making the choice. Yeah.
Absolutely, absolutely. Thank you so much for that, ma'am. So I'm going to just take a couple of audience questions here. We have Shauradeep who's asked that in the current situation, I believe everyone is emotionally raw. Just to mention, appraisals were handled extra carefully this time. As a manager, it becomes extremely important to manage emotions. And what things do you believe that he should work upon to make himself deal with people who are, if we may say, extra shaken this time around?
Can I answer that first, and
Yeah.
Srikanth, you can go after
So
that.
I will just say that if it is the same Shaurya Deep that we know, then a very big hi to you, Shaurya.
Yes, I
Yeah,
sure.
and it's a great question. Yeah, please go ahead.
Yeah. So, hi, Shaurya. So nice to hear from you, by the way. So, anyway, I think so. You're talking about emotions being raw and what you do about as a manager. You're being extra careful. That part about empathy, where we talked about how first mastering that concern, that compassion for people who may have different situations than us, I think is very important, because people can see through manipulation. People can see through superficial behavior. You say certain things which sound nice and warm and concerned, but you don't mean it in action, and you are not actually feeling them. So that will not come across well at all, and it is not empathy actually. So the first step of empathy is actually trying to feel the emotion the other person is experiencing, putting yourself in their shoes. And that can be very hard, because who has the time to really go through those things carefully and really experience that? It can be very exhausting, very draining as well. But I think as a manager, if we choose to do something about our capabilities, this is one thing that we should choose to do. We should try to build more compassion in our value system, not just learn typical sentences that may sound good, but actually build this in our value system, develop this. And it is not something that may come naturally. I may not feel moved by everyone's situation, but should I be moved or not? As a manager, I should be. So developing that value, I think, is very important. Nikandu?
I will just add a bit to that. Shaurya, what I understand, so ma'am has explained it almost entirely. I'll just add one more thing, is that we know that as an HR manager, sometimes it's very difficult for you to do that balancing act, because you have a mandate of probably, as you're talking about performance appraisal system, you know that you cannot rate everybody at the top category. Most areas we are doing this post distribution, etc., and all that. And at the same point of time, you are also aware about uh, you know um, what kind of difficult conditions under which people had to perform, particularly in the last 1 year. We all had, some places performance appraisal was suspended, some places it has been reduced to something like a mere formality and all that. So the challenge, I think, for an HR manager particularly, is how you do that balancing act where you have to be an administrator and at the same point of time a good employee advocate also, and that is very tricky. And we do not have something like a quick fix solution for that. It is left up to you, up to your organization's policies, your context, and everything, and most importantly your personal credibility as a professional, that how much, to what extent you can go, so that you do your best in the job. Sometimes we know that our hands are tied. We understand the situation. Okay, we probably already have the right value system, value or the ethos that ma'am was talking about. But the policies also require me to do certain things which I am not particularly very fond of. So how you do that balancing act, that is where your skill and acumen as an HR manager, as an HR professional comes in, right? So you balance all the roles of as we call as uh, the right administrative expert and employee champion, as if we refer to the famous model by Huxley, right? So all the roles have to be played. So that's something of which I don't have a ready-made solution for you, obviously, because you know best what applies in your organization. But I
Can
think
I
those are the
add
principles.
something, Diganto?
Yeah.
I'll just add to what you're saying. Um, I think in terms of if you are looking for, what is the behavior exactly in terms of translating what sir talked about, balancing act. Most people, I think, feel much better once they have been communicated to very clearly. A lot of times in organizations enough time is not spent in communicating things, not even as a group or individually. So I think in appraisals or any kind of difficult situation where as an HR you are tied by the policies and you really can't do much, explaining the situation in detail is very very important. And it might sound like I've already done the explanation and everyone should ideally know the policies, etc. But giving that one-on-one time to make the person understand, and also trying to help the person figure out the situation, providing that sort of a coaching where this person can think of what options they have now that they have this particular consequence. So helping people also think about that, without of course going outside the policy bounds of your organization. I think that genuine interest in helping people understand the situation and navigate the situation, I think that would really although it's not part, it may not be part of your role per se, but that is an extension that would, I think, take an HR manager a long way.
Okay. Okay. So I'm going to, as an extension to the same discussion, I'm going to tie up both Janisha and Samarth's questions here. Janisha wanted to know that in case if we have to take any steps to make our organization more aware of, emotional intelligence or emotional quotient per se, what are the factors that we take into account into our training program? How do we evaluate them? How frequently do we evaluate them? That's one. And on the same line, Samarth also wanted to know that, while managing 100 people with different attitudes and different perceptions, how do you think that emotional intelligence can be reflected in, let's say, the policies of the organization or the code of conduct? So is there, I agree that you said that there's no particular one rule fits all sort of a thing, but are there some key factors that organizations can keep in mind while framing these policies for them?
I think I will say my bit here, and then Professor Shilpa can add. I think the most important part, I guess, is first, the organization, particularly the top management, has to believe that this really works. I mean, that is probably the first step, because sometimes, see, we have uh, innumerable models and frameworks and theories being propositioned by a lot of people in the market, and there is it's sometimes natural that you somehow get lost, or you have some sort of skepticism towards whether this really works, whether it's really worth investing on this, because everybody is essentially trying to sell something. That is the idea. So I think the first and the most crucial step is that they really have to believe that emotional intelligence as a tool, or a systematic intervention through all components of emotional intelligence as part of the learning and development program, uh, as an intervention, as a process, it is really useful. I mean, it can give long-term results. I think then majority of your problem is actually solved. I think the most, uh, I would say, I can call it a barrier, or a hindrance, or the shortcoming comes because people don't believe in it. Yeah, so what? It is just another book. There are 50 other books. There are self-help books. That goes the common notion among people. That koi bhi utha lo, or there are so many of them. You go to internet, you go to a bookstore, you will find that everybody is giving solution. So first of all is that part, that where I actually believe in the idea, because the idea has been empirically tested. It is well researched, right? It has been established after long and rigorous years of research. It has been proven right in many occasions. So first I have to tell myself that, I will invest on this. I know that this is not going to give me results probably in the next quarter or so. It will take some time, but slowly, as I was trying to say in the earlier, I think one of the earlier questions, that slowly and gradually, once we make it as part of the whole L&D process, and it starts to sort of assimilate within the organization culture, then I think people start realizing that this is something which we really value, which is impossible to do without a direct and very, very strong support of the top management. It will just remain another workshop, 2 hour seminar or something. People will come and go and they will forget about it. We have to see that, what are the things that we are lacking in terms of our HR policies also. When we particularly, let's say, we solve problems, or we handle grievances, are we really looking at the employees' perspectives really well? Right? When those things are taken care of, then we can think of designing measurement systems, and there are definitely measurement systems that we probably can discuss in another longer forum, that how we measure that how much we have improved in our EQ part, right? So just like any other employee engagement survey or anything, that we can do that also. That is not the crux of the problem. The crux of the problem is, I think, in the belief in it, and taking this seriously and making it part of your policies. So that is where it becomes practical, and it is you are directly addressing your employees and managers. Right. Uh, Shilpa, if you want to add
Yeah,
something.
yeah. So, the second part of the question, which was about, people have so many different attitudes,
Yes.
100 people with 100 different attitudes, and then how do you, deal with that? So, different studies and even our own observation of human behavior, you will realize that people may have different opinions and different, preferences, different ideas about things, but in terms of the requirements from the workplace are universally same. So most people come to work not only to make a living, but also the sense of belonging it gives, the social relationships you're able to form, the warmth that you receive, the respect that you receive, the growth that you see in yourself. So I think people are bound by these common needs, even if the attitude towards different things may vary. So one is recognizing that and tapping into that. So if our organizational culture, which sir is talking about, which is so key, because that is the more encompassing thing, you as an individual, what you cannot do, when you create a larger culture, you are able to do that. And which of course starts with leadership believing in this. But so if you can create that sort of culture, which is inherently more respectful, more concerned about the employee as a stakeholder and not just the client or customer, is into developing the person, in taking care of the person, then I think it doesn't really matter if people have different attitude towards different things. So first, if everyone feels satisfied being a part of the organization, you can work on the skills. So I think what he meant by different attitudes was that then people express themselves in different ways, which can be very offensive to some people, which can make it difficult for many people to work with each other. So that is a matter of skill set. You can teach, like we talked about empathy, we talked about assertiveness. You can teach people to develop those skills, but first the organization needs to take care of these very, very basic human needs.
All right, I think that's very clear. And with that on empathetic and assertiveness that we spoke about, I have Krishika Pal here, who said that in some situations, one person is empathetic and as well as assertive, but the other person lacks these qualities. So how do we manage such relations? Because I'm trying to sort of understand you, but you are absolutely not getting it. So how do you sort of manage these relations there?
I'll take that first, and then
Yes.
I'll let Dikanto sir add to it. So, being assertive, like I said, is about recognizing your own rights, expressing yourselves, but also recognizing that other people have their own rights. So, other people have the right to see the situation in the way they want to see it, and in tackling the situation they want to see it. Uh, that itself, I mean, it's a very, very difficult thing to do, okay? To think that, I'm being empathetic and I'm being assertive, but the other person is not responding in ways that I want him or her to. Well, it is really nothing you can do about. So being assertive is actually about bearing the consequences of asserting your rights. So when you say at your work, you say, I'm not going to do this because I think it is ethically not right or unethical, even if it is something minor. Well, you may have to bear the consequence. You might be let go of sooner or later, or you might not be really appraised well. So again, going back, where we talked about self-awareness, knowing your values, what do you really value in life? And therefore, then, expressing yourself assertively and accepting the consequences. So the consequences are not going to be ideal all the time, but those are the immediate consequences. The long run consequences of being in tune with your values and with your, judgment, and expressing yourself more honestly, more genuinely, the long term results are much well paying in terms of your physical and mental health, because there's so much research showing this connection between mental health and physical health. People go back home from their work feeling so stressed, not because of the amount of work they have to do, but because of the emotional pressure that they feel, because they don't feel understood. People behave rudely with them, they have to behave rudely with others, etc., etc. So yeah, uh, I'll let sir add to it.
No, I will. I think you answered it. I'll just add uh, one bit here, and that I'll be almost like repeating myself there. So when I say that this problem, that part of your employee, or let's say the boss is empathetic, or boss understands the I but the subordinate doesn't, or the other way around. Uh, you reduce that chance of that happening if, as I said, that if it is part of your regular training intervention process, so that everybody in the organization is being made aware. Like ma'am was talking about the importance of communication in the organization. So we are not saying that it is only a selected group of people who should be made aware of the principles and how it can improve your work life. If we restrict ourselves only to work life, not even personal life. So it is the boss, it is the boss's boss, it is the most junior employee, it's everybody who has to get the idea. And now, of course, we will come to a situation where some people will probably not get the best results out of it, but that does not stop us from trying that intervention. That's what we are saying. Yes, we will never be perfect about uh, having the highest possible EQ for everybody. That would be the ideal situation, but that is an utopian situation. We know that organizations, different people, different personalities, does not happen. Doesn't stop us from trying though, right? So that's why I already talked about this, so I won't repeat myself. So yeah.
Okay. All right. Thank you so much, sir. I think in the interest of time, I will be sorry to the others whose questions we've not been able to take in. I'm sure you can write to us and we'll pass it on to the professors for a further discussion.
Yes, that would be really great. Anju,
Yes. I would. So for all of you who are looking at, I think a couple of questions were there in case if we can access the recording of the session. The session
Yes.
recording will be up on the Flame University's YouTube channel. I'm putting in the link on the chat box. You can access the same by tomorrow for the same. And if you have any questions, just respond to the email from where you got your panelist links, and I will be able to pass it on to the professors as well. Thank you so much, Professor Diganto and Professor Shilpa. I think for us, it's important now that in emotional intelligence, we always say that, you need to listen to probably converse and not really respond. So I think if we are more self-aware of that, we're going to have a much better balance as well. Thank you so much again. And all of the participants, we look forward to seeing you again for another masterclass 2 weeks later. I will come back with you with respect to what topic, what timing and everything, and you should be able to join us then. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.
Everyone. Thanks a lot.